friends, and welcome to All by My Shelf. I'm Miss Rachel, and it's so nice to see you. Today's panel is Love and Magic. That's what we need tonight. 6 adult authors are here to talk to you about love in their books, magic in the world, and just those beautiful little trope rom-com moments that they love. Those authors are DeLuca, Suzanne Park, Roselle Lim, Rosie Danan, Meryl Wilsner, and Sarvenaz Tash. If you're a Glenside patron, make sure you click the link in the description marked Glenside, which will take you to a document telling you all of the available e-copies you can check out right now. If you're someone who prefers hard copies, you can fill out the form that I've added there for you and tell me exactly which book you would like me to put on hold for you when the library is able to reopen. I hope you enjoy this panel. Welcome to our Love and Magic panel. I would like to start by having all of our lovely panelists introduce themselves and telling you all a little bit about their books. So whoever would like to go first, go.
Hey everyone, I am Rosie Danan and my pronouns are she, her. I wrote a debut romantic comedy that's coming out from Berkeley Romance on September 15th, 2020. I'm gonna try to show the cover on an iPad. Ooh! And it's about 2 unlikely roommates and their inconvenient chemistry with one another and how that sparks a plan to overthrow a porn empire. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Rachel, for setting this up.
I'm Sarvenaz Tash, and I I co-wrote this book called Ghosting, a Love Story, with my friend Sarah Skilton, which is why it's called Tash Skilton. It's my adult debut, but it's my 5th published book because I've written YA and middle grade before. And it's about 2 online dating ghostwriters who basically ghostwrite people's dating profiles, but they hate each other in real life. But they don't know that they're, talking to each other on behalf of their clients. So it's kind of like a Cyrano meets You've Got Mail mashup.
I love that. And I think that we share a publishing date. Does that come out on the 26th of May?
It does, yeah. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I'm Meryl Wilsner. My pronouns are they, them. I wrote Something to Talk About, which I also have next to me. It's my debut. It's coming out with Berkeley on May 26th. And it's about a Hollywood showrunner and her assistant. And a picture gets taken of them on the red carpet that leads tabloids and really the world to decide that they're dating, even though they aren't. And they hate the rumor. It couldn't come at a worse time. And then as they work through it, they sort of realize maybe that's not such a ridiculous idea after all. So it's definitely a slow burn. And I'm really excited to be here as well. Thank you so much, Rachel, for putting this all together.
My name is DeLuca. My debut is Well Met, that came out last fall. It is an enemies to lovers story that takes place at a small town Renaissance fair. And the follow-up is called Well Played, and it releases September 22nd of this year with Berkeley.
Hi, I'm Roselle Lim. This is my debut, Natalie Tan's Book of Luck and Fortune, and came out last year. It's about a chef who is finding her way through life, basically figuring out that this is what she wants to do in spite of what her mother wanted, and it's following in her grandmother's footsteps. My second book is out August 4th, same as Suzanne's, and it's Vanessa Yu's Magical Paris Tea Shop. It's set in Paris, and it is about the fortune teller that was in, other way around, this book. And it's about her niece, and yeah, it's set in Paris, also by Berkeley.
So I share a date with Roselle as well. So I'm August 4th debut release. It's this book, Loathe at First Sight. It's a enemies to lovers romantic comedy. I like to write about relatable people in hard situations. So this particular book is about a Korean American video game producer. Her name is Melody Ju, and she is tasked with releasing a controversial video game. And she's met with a whole slew of complications and is antagonized by everyone around her, especially the new MBA intern who happens to be the CEO's nephew. And that comes out from Avon Books.
Amazing. And Suzanne, you just had a YA come out too, right?
Yes. I don't know if I have that book here too, this one. Yes, this one just released 2 weeks ago. So it's been an interesting few weeks, plus also kind of rolling into the adult debut release. It's been a very busy time, but it's very exciting as well, just strange.
So the first thing I want to know is what initially drew you all to writing about love in a contemporary setting? And of course, this can be romantic love, sort of self-love, family love, any sort of those things. What sort of drew you towards those stories?
So rom-coms are kind of my like go-to escapism. They're just like the thing I love to read the most and watch the most. And I always really wanted to write like a really classic Nora Ephron inspired rom-com. And my friend Sarah, she and I were both doing freelance copywriting, looking for jobs. And she sent me this job listing that said online dating ghostwriters, and she just sent to me, and I was like, I called her and I was like, this is a book, like this is a rom-com and we should write it together. And so that's what drew me to write it. I always wanted to write, I've written YA rom-coms, but I always wanted to write like an adult one, and the idea just kind of fell into our lap, and it just seemed so perfect for that. So that's kind of what drew me to write this particular book.
A couple of reasons why I write in a contemporary setting. And I think first of all is that I'm too lazy to world build as far as writing something that's like a fantasy. I just feel like it feels like it would be really, really hard. But then when you write contemporary, it's also hard because you're still world building. So I kind of screwed myself there. But I think what draws me to write about love in a contemporary setting though, is that everybody that you see has a story. And, you know, like anybody that you see like in the grocery store, well, you know, maybe not these days, but, you know, people that you see, any normal person, to them, they are the main character of their story, and their story is epic. And so I think that the ordinary person, like in my case, in Well Met, the main characters are an English teacher and somebody who works in a bookstore. They're normal people doing normal things, but them falling in love is still a big deal. And I think that it deserves to be celebrated and deserves to be written about, and it's still magical.
I'm sort of like Jen in that I think that writing outside of contemporary sounds way too hard for me. It tends to be just not where my ideas are. Also, you know, I'll read books, you know, that are fantasy or sci-fi or historical, but it's just not really my wheelhouse when it comes to ideas. I do like to say that I've been writing romance since before I realized I was. My main characters just used to be straight white men, so I thought that it was literary. I was young, but yeah, all of my ideas are always contemporary romance, and it's not necessarily something I choose. That's just what I do. I like daydream about random characters, or, you know, like Jen said, people in the grocery store, just, oh, what if this person fell in love with a person like this? And then my mind just takes off and goes with it. So
my journey to writing contemporaries actually started with historicals, which is kind of funny, but that was what I always really liked reading growing up with romance. And there were some narratives that I really enjoyed, but then as I got older, I was like, oh, they're kind of like problematic faves, where you look back and you realize that, you know, those stories wouldn't hold up in a contemporary setting. And so I thought it would be really interesting to kind of take narratives that lived in historicals and then put them into a modern setting and see how that altered them. So one of my favorite tropes from historicals is the blue stocking and the rake, and how they engage in like lessons of seduction, where he's really experienced and confident, and she's like, let's just do it for science. And I thought that you could totally do that in a modern setting, but instead of having, you know, this hero guide this female character through her sexual awakening and sexual agency, what if you had a female character that kind of decided she was going to do it for herself? And she's like, we're going to take all that experience you have and we're going to make it a widely accessible platform, and everybody's going to have orgasms. So that's how you translate to a contemporary setting, and you get a romp.
I like to write awkward humans in awkward situations. So for me, so it's kind of what Jen does, but maybe way more, cringy to see sometimes. But when I do this, I like to write about people who have absolutely no game, and then they can't get their timing right. And because I feel like for me and people I know, that's just really how romance is for them. Like they just can't connect with the other person in that picture perfect way. So I like writing about that. And by doing this, I can see that more clearly in a contemporary setting. I usually, because I work for so long, I think my brain immediately goes to love in a workplace situation. So I think all of my rom-coms for adults will probably have that theme where you'll see the workplace being pulled in as a source of comedy and possibly a source for romance. So, and it really just fits the characters that I draw up and where they would be. I think I've always been enamored by Jim and Pam, in The Office. So I think that's always been something that I've aspired to do, just that type of chemistry.
I chose contemporary because I think that it's living now. Like you get a snapshot of what the world is at that point in time when you write your novel. Like for Natalie Tan, it was covering what was going on with gentrification in some of the big cities. And I think that that's one of those things where you look back on it and you go, oh yeah, it was written at this time, it reflected this time. It's kind of like a photograph, one of those things where you look back and you go, I'm hoping that there's not going to be a bunch of pandemic novels coming out, because I frankly don't want to re-remember this time. But in this case, with this, it was capturing the gentrification of that. And for this, it was me reliving what Paris was like last August. So capturing that, I find that writing in the contemporary, you get to make photographs in novel forms.
And since we sort of touched on setting, and we just talked about Paris, obviously, we've got some pretty magical settings in our books. We've got Paris, we've got a Ren Fair, we've got Hollywood, and then we have a couple that are like cross-country moves, and we've got a heroine in the video game workplace. And so I want to know what sort of came first, the main characters or that setting?
Okay, for me, it was Evelyn from Natalie Tan is the fortune teller. And I always thought she's one of those mysterious ones that I've always wanted, that it's just begging for her own story, but it's told through her niece. So it started with her, and then I've got my agent convincing me basically to go to Paris. She's like, just go. Take your book money and go. You've never been, go. And after going to Paris and eating all of the things and seeing all of the things and then eating more of all of the things, it's that the setting was just too perfect that they had to be in Paris.
So for me, in 2016, when I started this book, I had visited a friend at a large gaming studio in Orange County, and I had never been to a gaming studio, and she walked me around, and that's where I got the idea of, wow, this would make a really interesting backdrop for just any book. And then just talking to her about the challenges of working in the gaming industry, I realized that there really was an interesting book idea here, and I also knew at the time, and probably still hasn't, that not a lot has been written about the video game industry. So I felt like the place was actually very impressive and really great. But then when you hear the behind the scenes, it changed my perspective. And so I thought that that was a great backdrop for my book.
For me, I actually had these characters who I sort of came up with a lot of the ideas for before they were ever named or in any particular setting or whatever. I had boss lady and assistant lady, and that's how I would talk about them when I was talking to friends about brainstorming ideas and things. And I liked the idea, sort of a common trope in romances is fake dating, which I love. And I liked the idea of taking that and twisting it a little bit and making it mistaken for dating. So I loved the idea of two people who weren't together, but everyone had decided that they were. And I think that Hollywood came from that in part because I think it's a sort of natural place where that rumor could get started about two people, and that other people would actually pay attention and care because, this is a celebrity, instead of just like your boss down the street or whatever. So I definitely had the characters first and put it into the setting. But I think the setting also lends a lot to the story because it lends a lot to the characters themselves. They're both, career driven, and being in Hollywood you get to see a lot more about who they are as people because of what ended up being the setting.
Mine's kind of funny. I really feel like they're intrinsically linked for me, the setting and the characters, because this idea came to me as an inciting incident. So it was this idea that what if you kind of like unknowingly moved in with a porn star and you found out a couple days in, what's the first thing that you would do? And I think, my heroine Clara does what any of us would do, which is you put on Safe Search and you Google them. And so this moment of this kind of, sexy porn star walking in and he sees his new roommate Googling him, and sort of the resulting conversations that come out of that, both from a comedic perspective, but also it like opens up a dialogue about sex and intimacy that doesn't always happen for roommates or strangers even. So I don't think I could separate the two. It was very much like this moment, now build a story around it.
For me, it was definitely the setting. I had been attending a small town Renaissance fair for probably like 8 to 10 years that takes place in Central Florida. And then one year I decided to volunteer and I thought, how hard could it be? And then I ended up, in this very uncomfortable tavern wench outfit serving beer to people out in the woods for 13 hours a day. And it was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And, but it was just the most amazing experience. And I was so inspired by being out there in the woods. And I was so inspired by the fact that the costume made me feel like a different person. I was, strapped into this corset and this long skirts, and these pirates would come into the tavern and I would suddenly be very interested in them. And it was a weird feeling to feel like a different person. And then that got me thinking about setting a story at a Renaissance fair where there's two people who can't stand each other. But then when they're in costume, suddenly there's an attraction. And then it's, trying to figure out what of that is real, what of that is in character, is any of it real, and that sort of thing. And so it really sprung from the setting. And then the characters just sort of came from there.
So for me, it was definitely the situation of, what they were doing, but I live in New York and it just seemed natural to set it in New York. And I think also because it was such an homage to Nora Ephron and that kind of thing. New York actually ends up becoming like a very central part of the book, because it ends up being about Sarah's from LA. So her character is a transplant from LA who hates New York, and my character Miles like loves New York and thinks it's the greatest thing ever. And that's one of the things they kind of end up fighting about. So it's kind of, reading it now, it's kind of interesting just because New York is so sad and different right this very moment. And I, kind of like look at the cover of this cover and the UK cover, which is like this beautiful cover of like New York in springtime, which is like probably one of my favorite things. And I just kind of like get a little emotional just thinking about how it's not like that right now. And I really hope that it goes back to being that soon.
So one of the things that I love about all your books is that you have such fully realized characters. And while your main characters are great, I also am always curious as to your favorite non-point of view character to write, because I feel like sometimes there's just those sneaky side characters that come into the story and you're like, I just love you so much. You're such a little babe and I just want to hold you. You're great. So who's your favorite secondary character to write?
Mine is, I really like writing characters that behave in like the exact opposite way that you would expect them to. So I have a ex-girlfriend character in my narrative, and traditionally that archetype is somebody that's in your story to kind of show that the hero and the heroine are right for each other. She's there to be like cold and act as a foil, be jealous and get between them. And my character Naomi, she doesn't do any of those things. She is a Jewish bisexual sex worker, and she's just like supportive of the hero. She's his confidant and she just wants best for him. And she also really helps kind of empower the heroine on her journey. And she keeps them in line. Like, she's tough and she knows exactly how much power she has, but she's essential to the narrative in a lot of different ways as a supporting character, but also as a key part of the business they develop. So yeah, she's got a big place in my heart.
She has a big place in my heart as well. As someone who has read Rosie's book, I love Naomi a lot. For me, my favorite character, sort of side character, I guess, to write is one of my main character's best friends, Evelyn, who is Joe's best friend. And Joe is older. Joe is the boss in this situation, and Joe's older. And so I loved writing Evelyn because she and Joe have been friends forever. And there's a lot of backstory that, never makes the actual book, but informs the actual book in a lot of ways. Things that I know that nobody else is ever going to know just because there won't be a reason to. And so having that sort of getting to explore their background as people and as friends was something that I loved doing, even if it didn't end up, making it on the page in the book. Plus she loves to give Joe a lot of crap, which is always fun to do. So Evelyn was my favorite character.
I could talk. Mine was a character, his name is Asher. He is the office mate, the gross office mate of my main character, Melody. And he's just that guy that gets into work just a few minutes before her every day, no matter what. He brings in 2 coffees into the office and drinks both of them in front of her. He's just very, just a character that you just love to like want to hate, but he does have a redeeming arc in the end. So I kind of feel like I, did a lot of work around him. And also she gets stuck in an elevator with him, and how you hear some stories about romance blooming in an elevator. Well, I really wanted to create complete chaos in the elevator with this guy. So it's the most non-romantic scene I could think of, and she shares it with him, and he was just a lot of fun to write for me.
I love Asher from Loathe. He did grow on me, Suzanne. For me, it's kind of characters. It's Auntie Faye and the Auntie Brigade from Vanessa, and these are the aunts that are just would pick at you, would meddle you, but love you so much. It's that fine line between love and suffocation, but it's just writing about these big families and how they're just so gossipy and snoopy, but they really are looking out for you. Every one of my aunts are in there fictionally, but they were really fun to write.
My favorite side character is actually one Sarah wrote, which is Mary Clarkson, which is Zoe's mentor, who's pretty based on Carrie Fisher. So she's kind of like this eccentric actress, now a script doctor, and every scene she's in, she kind of steals. But the thing I enjoyed writing too is that we made up this backstory because they work for 2 rival matchmaking copywriting companies that were started by an ex-husband and ex-wife. So we have these emails from the ex-husband, ex-wife, and like these inter-office memos at the beginning of every chapter. And so Sarah had Clifford and I had Leanne, and they just like have this interesting like business styles. Clifford is just like totally inappropriate and just like horrible but hilarious, and Leanne is just like more subversively like bad. And so they were just really fun to write because they only appear in like 1 or 2 scenes, but they have those emails at the beginning of every chapter.
I'm one of those people that plans my books and my stories and my characters, and I know exactly who they're going to be before I start writing. I have to have a plan. So when I was first starting to write Well Met, I came up with this character named Mitch, who is the hot kilt wearing, you know, studly dude, and he was going to be this like overgrown kind of jock frat boy that, you know, never really got over his high school glory days, and he's sort of a little bit of a town bully, especially with regard to the main character, the male main character. And so my plan was for him to kind of see the 2 main characters getting together and kind of horn in and get in on that. And so that was my plan. And then I started writing. And the first time that Mitch walks into the room, he starts fist bumping all the kids. He's this super cool dude. He's just so nice. He's funny. And he would not be a jerk. I kept trying to make him be the villain of the story, and he would not be the villain, to the point that there's a scene where he meets up with the female main character in the bar, and instead of hitting on her, he tells her to go over and see the male main character, because they obviously have a thing. So he started shipping it like in the middle of my first draft. And so he was the character that would not listen to me. And I just had to sort of let him go and do his thing and be who he was. And that's never happened to me before as a writer. I'm used to having a little more control of my characters when I'm writing them. So it was kind of fun to just sort of let Mitch be Mitch, and he become probably my favorite character. A lot of people have written me and told me that he's their favorite character too. So it's been kind of neat to have that happen, and have him sort of emerge as this fully grown, fully realized thing that I didn't even know was going to happen.
So what are some of y'all's favorite tropes in books, and are there any that readers can expect to see in your books? And those can be romance tropes, they can be like character archetypes, whatever you want.
Well, this is pretty obviously hate to love, and which is one of my favorite tropes, and I'd never done before, but always wanted to. And it was really fun to write, and it was kind of, I don't know, this was a strange book because it kind of flowed out of both of us really easily in a weird way. I think we were trying to make each other laugh. That was like our main goal. So it was like a really nice pure goal to have, and I think in that way it was just like really fun to write, and we both really loved that trope. And it was just fun like having them be like really mean to each other and just like, you know, really snarky and have all that like fun, you know, hate to love banter. So yeah, I'm glad that this got to be my attempt at that trope, because I had so much fun writing it.
Mine's enemies to lovers, pretty clearly in the title. But with her, she has a lot of enemies all around her, so I think the title had a double meaning. But I love enemies to lovers. I'll read any version of that that comes out, and I love reading both YA and adult versions of that. But the other trope that I love is second chance love. It just has a little place in my heart, special place, and I think the next book might have that in it. I have never tried to write that, but I think that that's something I would like to as a aspirational goal.
I have kind of a weird favorite trope. It is the arranged marriage trope. And the reason I like it is because I feel like it's like a super trope, because it usually brings together enemies to lovers and forced proximity all in one narrative. It's not in my book. It's one of the few ones that isn't in my book. My book is like a trope bingo card, basically. So I think I mentioned it's roommates to lovers, forced proximity, but it's also opposites attract, which is one of my favorites. So these two people who you're like, they can't live together, they're gonna kill each other. Because my heroine is this like super uptight art historian type A, and my hero is a porn star, and he's just like kind of like a human Labrador retriever, basically. And since they live together, they don't have It's Only One Bed, which is another favorite, but I would like to introduce There's Only One Shower coming out of this book as a new trope.
Okay, my favorite trope is, it's not romance related, but it's food porn. Like, I just love writing about food. Like, I make sure that I eat every single item that I have written about. I find that it just adds that extra layer, in that I want to make food one of the main characters really in all of my books.
My favorite tropes are sort of, I have like an overarching one that I think covers a couple of different things, which is I really like two people who aren't supposed to be together, but really want to be together. So, you know, whether that ends up being like, oh, like best friend sibling or sibling's best friend, or in this situation, you know, it's a boss and assistant. That's definitely, that style is my favorite relationship to read. Is there's all of these reasons why we shouldn't be together. And then, but there's, you know, this feeling inside me that means that we have to be, sort of, is my favorite. And it definitely appears in my book. And then another one is slow burn, which 100% my book is a slow burn. And Jen and I argue over the definition, because my definition is it takes forever to get to a place where they, you know, the two characters do line up and they do come together and are able to come together in that way.
Yeah, I really thought that I wrote a slow burn, and then I read Meryl's book, and to me, a slow burn is like, you know, maybe halfway through they finally kiss, and Meryl was like, no, we're raising the bar on that. So I was just super impressed by that. I do love a good slow burn though, because I love the pining and the yearning and the well, does that other person feel that way about me? And that's really a great one. That's one of my favorites, and I write a lot of slow burn. Yeah, well, Met's definitely a slow burn. Well Played, the new one, is definitely a slow burn. I'm going to try to make it not quite as much of a slow burn on the third one, but I'm probably not going to do that. It'll probably be a slow burn too. I love Enemies to Lovers, which was what Well Met is. I love, gosh, there's a lot of like, I don't know if I'd call them romance tropes. They're not really romance tropes, but I poured a lot of my nerdiness into Well Met. I love Shakespeare. I love pirates. I love those sorts of things. And I just took all of these things that made me happy as a person, and I just put them into my book. And I was sort of shocked that it all came together and it's an actual book.
Speaking of things that make us happy, thank you for the segue, Jen. One of the things that I feel like is so important right now is media that brings joy, which I think is something that all of your books accomplish in different ways. And so have you been reading anything that's brought you joy recently, like while stuck at home or before all of this went down? Or even like if you've watched something that you've really liked that you would like to share with the audience?
I had the privilege and the honor of reading Suzanne's book before it was picked up, and one of the things that I really enjoyed was that I read her book and I got like this view of what the video game industry is like. There's a show on Apple TV called Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet, which is also an inside view of a video game. It's a comedy. It is hilarious. It is wonderful. And it has, but yeah, it was just great. And it's a perfect pairing with Suzanne's book. It's so funny. It talks about all of the sexism that's going on in there. There's a bit of like just the politics, like the gender politics and everything. It was just so funny. And Suzanne's book is funny too, so I really highly recommend that show if you like to see what the video game industry is like from the inside.
Earlier this year, I read Love Lettering by Kate Claiborne, and if anyone follows me on Twitter, they're aware of how much I love it because I yelled about it the whole time I was reading it. It definitely brought me a lot of joy, but I also thought about it just as we were talking about setting, because New York is just definitely a very important setting and character basically in that book. which made me think of it. But yeah, I love that book a lot. That brought me a lot of joy for sure.
I feel like I have the perfect sort of quarantine combination of reads going on right now. I have a rom-com, which is, again, I think comfort food for all of us. I'm reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. It's just incredible. It's like sharp and charismatic, and it leaps off the page. But then I have the privilege of reading an arc of Haley Sutton's The Lady Upstairs, which is a queer feminist revenge thriller. And it's good because I'm getting like kind of soothing, but I also get to have catharsis in all the anger that I have right now. And yeah, it's so good. It's an LA noir told through this kind of very different lens than we traditionally see it in that like hyper kind of masculine genre. And yeah, so I just kind of sip back and forth between those two, and I am getting through it.
Oh, I have been unable to read anything, which is very strange for me because normally that's like what I turn to in times of stress, but I can't focus on any books right now, which I think makes things harder. But I have been, Jennifer Ely has been reading Pride and Prejudice on her Instagram, and it's amazing. And it's like basically been getting me through just listening to her read, like one of my favorite books, every day, and just like letting her voice like kind of wash over me. So I do recommend that. It's very relaxing, and just it's like the only thing I think that calms me down lately.
I've been having a hard time reading too. Like just focusing on, gosh, just about anything. And I'm usually a person that devours books, so it's been weird. But I tried to pivot away from romance for a little bit, and I started reading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and I think that's how you say her name. But it's been really, really interesting. It's kind of a supernaturally story about like the Yale secret societies and that sort of thing. And it's been fascinating. It's been a fascinating read. But again, like my focus is such that I'm reading like 25 pages and I'm like, oh man, I must have been reading for hours. No, you haven't. But so the only other thing that's really been getting me through right now is a lot of Animal Crossing, which is, I just find it very, very soothing to just go and plant some trees and do some fishing and call it a day.
Two things I love most are food and travel, and Roselle's book really just encompasses both in such a lovely way. So I think that's a really good read, especially wherever we are with the current situation. By the time August rolls around, I think it's a very good lighthearted read, and I highly recommend it. The other book I'm reading currently that I downloaded just recently and started just getting engrossed in is Alicia Rye's Girl Gone Viral. I just thought that would be the right book to pull me out of my reading slump, and it was. So it's a perfect book for that, and her writing is charming and funny, and you really get to see her descriptions of people are just fantastic. So I really, really am enjoying that read.
Other great books that you should check out are those written by our panelists. So panelists, one more time, can we go down the sort of invisible line and reiterate your name, your book, and where people can find you on the internet, your social media or website or whatever you would like to share?
I'm Sarvenaz Tash, and I'm the co-author of Ghosting, a Love Story, which is under the name Tash Skilton because I wrote it with my friend Sarah Skilton. And you can find me at Sarvenaz Tash pretty much everywhere. Oh, and this comes out May 26th from Kensington.
I can go. So my book, Loathe at First Sight, I don't know if I can prop it. There we go. Is August 4th, comes out from Avon Books. It's video game rom-com, and yeah, I don't remember what else we're supposed to say.
Where people can find you on the internet?
Oh, yes, you can find me at Suzanne Park. I've actually taken all the Suzanne Parks except for LinkedIn, so that's where you can find me. The other Suzanne Parks are probably angry, but that's where you can find me.
And if people want to read one of your books right now, what's that book called?
Oh, you're better at doing this than I am. This is why we need Rachel. My current book that's out is The Perfect Escape. and it is a young adult romantic comedy about a Korean American teenager who meets his dream girl at a zombie escape room where he works, and they both need money, and they decide to enter a zombie survivalist competition together to win a huge cash prize. And so that's that book, and that is out now. Thank you.
I'm Rosie Danan, and you can find me wherever the internet is sold at Rosie Danan. And my debut romantic comedy, The Roommate, comes out on September 15th. But you can request an arc from Jessica Brock at Penguin Random House any day now. Thanks for having me.
Jen DeLuca, my book Well Met is available now through Berkeley, and the follow-up Well Played, I did the iPad thing that Rosie did, is available September 22nd, also from Berkeley, and you can find me at jendeluca.com and mostly on Twitter.
I'm Meryl Wilsner. My debut romance comes out from Berkeley. It's Something to Talk About. Comes out May 26th, and you can find me also mostly on Twitter, but pretty much anywhere at Meryl Wilsner. Thanks again for having us, Rachel.
I'm Roselle Lim. This is already out, Natalie Tan's Book of Luck and Fortune by Berkeley, and this will be out August 4th, book 2. And you can find me at Roselle Writer on Instagram and on Twitter.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for tuning into this panel. If you're looking for more panels like it, make sure you check out the All By My Shelf playlist on our YouTube page. It'll tell you all of the different panels that you're able to watch.